"I'll give you a ride home," I said, even more loudly, but the silence continued around us. Hello interwebs, and welcome back. I'm Shana, and this is where I share my life and stories and adventures and opinions, and whatever else I feel like. And today we are back with another spooky, creepy story, this time submitted by one of my lovely subscribers. Today's story was submitted by Nurse Wycked, aka Mama Bear, over on Twitter, so if you'd like to go show her some love, please do that. Also, if you want me to read your spooky, creepy story over here on my channel, there is a link to that email down in the description box below. Send your email over there. Please make sure to let me know what you want me to shout out for you, if you want me to shout anything out. And without too much rambling, since we've already done that, let's go ahead and get into the story. In all transparency, I have not read the story yet, but it is a little bit longer than my usual stories, so make sure you grab yourself a drink, pause this video if you need to, and let's get started. Top 10. Man, Gov, you made it here just in time. 5 minutes to last call. Your usual? Being the night shift female tending bar at a very small neighborhood establishment had its benefits and drawbacks. Well, I got the chance to know my regulars. The music was never too loud to talk, and I rarely had a problem with my customers getting belligerent and wanting to start a fight. It also meant that I rarely left with more than $50 in tips, mostly in quarters, change from the $2.75 for a domestic beer. Not that we had anything that wasn't domestic, but it sounded good on the sign outside. Excitement was limited to which of the regulars was riding the bar's bicycle girl. You know, the one that was easily loaned to anyone. John, the red-headed electrician at the moment, or the now and then stranger who would wander in. At Diana's, I knew nearly every person who walked through the door. Imagine Cheers, where everyone yells, "Norm!" when he walked through the door, except it being practically every patron rather than just one. There was Pam, the aforementioned bicycle girl, John, the post office supervisor, who rarely came in with the same woman on his arm twice, even though he was married, and he had never been on the bicycle to my knowledge. Chuck, the retired postal worker, who would be left in his car with his keys beneath the driver's side doormat, with doors locked for him to sleep off his drunkenness until he was sober enough to drive home. Paul, the water company executive, who delighted in rattling the water pipes of the building by adjusting the taps in the men's room at just the right point, often nearly toppling the bottles from their rack and eliciting a yell from whoever was tending the bar to, "Cut it out, Paul!" Rick and Steve, the gay male couple who were holdovers from the bar's prior life as The Outlet, Come In and Get Plugged, a gay club that lasted about 2 months. And Gov, short for governor, the postal sorter who worked with John and Chuck. Gov had a real name, but it was something completely forgettable. And I think only one person in the bar may have known what it actually was at some point in the past. When I'd asked about it early in my illustrious career slinging booze, all Gov had done was laugh his Eddie Murphy-like guffaw and shake his head. Unlike the rest of the crowd, Gov was the only non-Caucasian person who visited Diana's. Occasionally, we'd have a stranger wander in. The neighborhood wasn't the height of affluence or glamour, but it was rare. Gov would come in late nights, rarely talk much, laugh at all the bar jokes that were bandied about, and typically arrived on bicycle, the legitimate kind, not the proverbial mentioned before. He lived just a few short blocks away, and typically went home after work to his wife, had dinner with her, then rode down for 2 or 3 beer nightcap before we closed. And if I comped the price of at least one of his beers, he was happy to stay after last call and closing time to help me hump out the multiple cases of beer and booze to restock everything for my day shift bartender. I set everyone up with their last drinks of the night and started doing the last of the dishes, mostly shot glasses and a wine glass or two, as my regulars chatted amongst themselves. Once that was done, I turned and noticed that Gov was sitting a few stools away from his regular seat, head down over his beer, not listening to much of the banter going on at the far end of the bar. "Everything cool, Gov?" I asked, not expecting much of a response, honestly. "Weird shit, man. Weird shit." He glanced at me as he tipped his bottle, then set it down, shaking his head as he stared at the beer coaster. "Weird. What weird shit?" I asked, reaching for another Bud Light and setting it in front of him. My usual free beer for cooler help payment. The kids, man. They were at my house when I left. Now they out in the lot, he said in his quiet voice. What kids? I didn't know you had kids, Gov, I said, putting away the glasses. Ain't my kids, he answered with a tone of not-so-patient explanation. Weird little white kids with creepy-ass eyes, man. Standing outside my house, holding hands like they lost, wanting to use my phone. I ain't giving no creepy little shadow-hiding little kids my phone. This bitch cost me $275, he said, waving his platinum-colored iPhone. And they eyes was all creepy. Black eyes, man, he said, taking another long drink of beer and setting the empty one on the shelf. Not like brown, like mine, or black, like just dark, but the whole thing was black, you know? He asked, mostly to himself, shrugging. So there were weird kids outside your house at this time of night? I asked, glancing at the giant clock over the back of the bar. It was already almost 2:30 in the morning, and at 3, the overhead lights would go on and everyone would be out the door. Yeah, man. I told him to foot. He started and then looked at me. Gov still had the chivalry gene when it came to talking to women, even in the bar. Get lost, he continued. And they sort of stood there and watched me when I got on my bike. Then I come around the corner down here, and there they are, standing out by your car. Not messing with anything or doing anything with it, just standing there. And they wanted to come in here and use the phone, man. I told them that it's a bar and shit, but they didn't get it. Just kept standing there, looking at me. Dunno how they got down here so quick, but it was the same weird kids. I locked my bike up, I can tell you that much. He finished, nodding, and grabbed the fresh beer. I waited a few more minutes to see if he was going to tell me anything else, but he resumed staring at his beer coaster and shaking his head, muttering, weird shit, man, now and then. Hey, Chuck, I yelled, grabbing the old man's attention as I started down toward the populated end of the bar. I didn't do it, he answered with a grin. You always are the one who did it, and you know it, I answered with my own grin. But right now, can you go check out by my car and see if there's anything going on? Gov said some kids were standing out by my car when he came in. You gotta be shitting me, Chuck said, doing exactly what I'd done, checking the clock. It's damn near 3 in the morning. I know. And once you guys leave, I gotta be here by myself for at least an hour after we get the coolers filled doing the end of the day paperwork. If there are weird kids, or any kids, or hell, a weird dog I've never seen before standing out by my car when I leave, and I have to call the cops, Diana will kick my ass. My bar owner, Diana, had 3 rules when it came to her place. No kids, no cops, and no Jägermeister. Well, why not? The first one was obvious. In Indiana, no one under 21 could be in the bar. The second was paranoia. We had not quite legal gambling machine in one corner and still allowed people to smoke cigarettes in the building. And the third was from a really wild night a few weeks before I'd been hired that had resulted in the destruction of more than 1 bar stool, 3 arrests, 7 people needing stitches, and the job opening that I filled. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't want to listen to Diana any more than you do, Chuck said, rubbing a small scar on his forehead. She bitched for a week because she had to pay for my ER visit. He got up from his bar stool and stood for a minute, making sure he was steady enough to navigate the door and out to the parking lot, and made it about 3 steps before Gov was off his own bar stool and grabbing my arm. Don't, man. Those kids are weird shit. Just let them be. I'll go out there or stay here until Leigh's ready to leave or whatever. Lisa can kick the crap out of just about anything, Chuck said, with a wink in my direction. You still have that equalizer? I reached down under the bar and lifted the 2-foot-long cement-filled lead pipe wrapped in duct tape. Always, I said, with a big smile. See, Gov? She'll be fine. Besides, I'm sure their parents had probably either come and got them or called the police to hunt them down. There aren't any kids that would be hanging out in the bar parking lot at 3 a.m. Definitely not with the cops crawling this strip of road. You know, there are always at least 3 cruisers waiting for some dumbass to try and make it home from the Tiara with one of the strippers, he said, regarding the club that was 2 blocks away. We know to use the side street and avoid the ticket picket, he chuckled as he started back to his bar stool. We all referred to the abundance of cops in the area as Ticket Picket, as in the fence put up to stop all the drunks and speeders with a nice $150 autographed summons to appear, and most likely a tour of Indy on the way downtown to the drunk tank. Gov seemed relieved that Chuck wasn't going outside, and he returned to his beer, grabbing it and moving down to his usual seat, closer to the rest of the bar's remaining crowd. Either way, guys, finish up, I said. I've got to go mop the ladies' room and shut down the pizza oven in the kitchen. I knew I could leave the guys alone for 5 minutes it took me to unplug the microwave, the ancient pizza oven in question. Diana had them all believing that we had actual restaurant equipment in the back room, and grabbed the mop and bucket to swab down the linoleum in the women's bathroom. Not that it helped much. The stuff hadn't been changed since the place was a gay club about 3 years ago, and they'd put in the most horrendous purple tie-dyed pattern tiles they could find back then. The first time I saw it, all I could think of was that if you weren't feeling a little nauseous when you came into the bathroom, that tile might tip the balance into a guaranteed barf fest. But Diana wasn't too concerned with replacing it, since 90% of the customers were male, and the men's restroom had solid gray industrial tiles with little flecks of color that never showed any sort of major stains. I'd leave that mop up for after everyone was gone. I headed to the back, listening to the guys chat as they left, with Gov doing unofficial door duty, locking the door after each person left. Then I heard him head to the walk-in cooler to heft a half a dozen cases of beer onto the dolly and start bringing it out for me to load under the bar coolers. While I was there, I shut out the kitchen light and glanced out the back door, able to see my car under the single street light that shone on our parking lot. The only light that would be there when I closed down the bar completely and killed out the lights. I didn't see anyone or anything around my old Chevy, and could see Chuck walking out to his pickup, steady enough that he wouldn't need a sleep-off before heading the 1.5 miles back to his place. I wheeled the mop and bucket toward the restrooms as Gov set the last case of liquor bottles on the bar itself. "I'm out," he called, and I followed him to the front door, thanking him for the help with the heavy lifting of the cases. "Watch out for the ghoulies," I joked as he stepped through the door. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes shadowed by the front door overhead. "Weird shit, man," he said one more time with a shake of his head, then started toward the side of the building where his bike was chained to the patio railing. I waved as he glanced back at me, raising a hand in return, and then closed and locked the door. Being alone at the end of the night was alternately creepy and a relief. I could turn on the jukebox and play the music I preferred while I mopped the bathrooms, stocked the cooler, and ran the final report on the register, counting down the money and putting it in the safe in the boss's office in the back of the building. I flipped on the overhead lights. The usually dark bar was flooded with the bright of the fluorescent bulbs as I mopped the bathrooms and the hallway, flipped the stools upside down onto the bar so I could run the ancient vacuum cleaner, another token gesture of cleanliness that didn't make a difference on the worn and stained floor, and then keyed in the code that left the cash register chattering out a long end-of-day tape while I rotated the beer bottles in the cooler and switched out the few almost empty bottles on the shelves for full ones. I tossed the empty beer cases and liquor bottle boxes near the back of the door. The day shift bartender, Mark, would take out the trash in the daylight hours, since the only dumpster was behind the building in the pitch blackness at this hour. I stepped back behind the bar and grabbed the receipt tape, the cash drawer, and my tip jar, and headed back to my boss's office. Just as I stepped out from behind the bar and started toward the swinging doors to the back, I heard a weird thump from the kitchen area and the back door. I paused, listening, waiting to see if I'd hear it again. I reached over and hit the button to turn off the sound, silencing Katy Perry for a moment, and just as I did, I heard another sound. A screech, like metal on metal, and what the hell was going on outside? Were the kids that Gov had been so concerned with actually out there screwing around? I put the cash drawer down with my tip jar on top of it and walked into the dark kitchen, still able to see by the light from the parking lot streaming through the glass of the door. Granted, I couldn't see much from the vantage point, just my car, and a few feet to either side of it, since it was the only window that looked out on the side of the building. But if there were a couple of teenagers keying my piece of crap Lumina, I wasn't going to hesitate to call the police. Yeah, it was probably about the same age as the kids who would be doing the keying, but still, it was all I had to get me from here to there, and I busted my ass to keep it roadworthy. I watched from the kitchen for a few minutes to see if anyone was around, and didn't see anyone near my car, or any shadows of anyone in the lot. The outside lights were already off, leaving my car in a puddle of orange sodium arc lamplight. But I still would have noticed any movement in the area by the way of people driving past with headlights on. Nothing looked like it was moving, and I didn't see anything outside. Kids, adults, dogs, cats, or other night-dwelling critters. So I shrugged it off and went back to my closing duties. Once I'd finished counting the drawer, cashing out the tips, an astounding $62.75, and making out the deposit slip for the next morning, I tucked my money into the back pocket of my purse, put everything in the floor safe, replaced the horrible rug my boss had covering it, thinking to myself that I needed to buy Diana some fashion sense or taste for Christmas this year, and grabbed the giant ring of keys. As I finished my last 2 jobs of the night, putting the bar stools back down on the floor and double-checking the pool table to be sure that the chalk cubes were still usable, I thought about Gov and his weird story about the black-eyed kids that had been at his house asking to use the phone. I was halfway between wondering if Gov had been drinking before he came to the bar and thinking that any kid who were out on the street at 2 a.m. probably did seem a little creepy, especially in this neighborhood. I'd overheard him saying to Paul that the little blonde girl was freak, man. She was like 12 or something, with her hair up in pigtails, trying to look younger or something, I guess. I also thought about the fact that I was probably one of the few people in the bar who were internet savvy in any way, and had established early on in my days at Diana's, except for Tara, who came in a couple of times a month, I was the only horror fanatic in the place. The boys, as I referred to my regulars when I was talking to friends, tended to run more toward Garth Brooks, Rebecca McEntire, John Wayne movies, and NASCAR. If even one of them had a Facebook page, I'd have been stunned. And they certainly didn't spend time watching YouTube videos of the top 10 creepiest haunted hotels like I did. Yet another blessing or curse of the neighborhood watering hole. My customers were all either retired, old enough to retire soon, or in Gov's case, completely engrossed in their daily pattern of getting up, going to work, coming home for dinner, watching a little TV with the missus, coming in for a beer or 3, and then going home to go to bed and do it all again the next day. I learned my lesson when I mentioned Freddy Krueger once, and Rick had asked, "Isn't that the hunky guy in the yellow spandex with the knife things in the back of his hands?" When I'd explained that he was thinking of Wolverine from X-Men, he responded, "Whatever, he's got a great ass," earning him an elbow from his partner Steve, who rolled his eyes and ordered another glass of Chardonnay. The thought of the black-eyed children creeping around in the parking lot of a bar on the only seedy side of Indianapolis was amusing at best, and downright ludicrous at worst. According to all the stories, they could be aliens, ghosts, or vampires, which of course was why you had to give them permission to come into your house to use the phone, because vampires can't come in unless they're invited. Maybe I should go smear some leftover pepperoni pizza behind my ears just in case, I thought to myself, smiling as I set the alarm and walked outside, locking the deadbolt and doing my habitual double shake on the door to make sure it was secure. I hitched my purse on my shoulder as I dropped the bar key ring into it and pulled out my car keys, then looked up and around. Another habit, just to be sure that I wasn't being followed. Yes, I had taken plenty of self-defense classes and had pepper spray at the ready on my keychain, but being aware of your surroundings is always the first thing we're taught as women, regardless of what classes we take. It took about 5 seconds from the time I looked around until I came to a stop, noticing my heart rate steadily climbing. The first thing I noticed was Gov's bike, laying pretty much in the center of the darkened parking lot. A twisted mess of bright green aluminum and 2 rings of treaded rubber that used to be tires. What the? Had someone hit him on their way out of the parking lot? I didn't see any blood in the shadows or around the bike, or a body-shaped lump laying nearby. Granted, I didn't have any bright light, but there was enough light from the street lamp and a passing car for me to tell that much. "Gov?" I called out in a semi-quiet voice. I didn't want to really yell because there were houses just on the other side of the fence behind the bar, and the last thing we needed was a 911 call from some grumpy-ass housewife I'd woken up at almost 4 a.m. 2 more slow steps, and I could see around the edge of the building and take in the entire parking lot, including my Lumina, at the edge of the lot under the street lamp. I exhaled, slightly relieved, when I noticed Gov sitting on the hood of my car, feet propped up on the bumper, hands clasped in front of him, head hanging. "Dude, what happened to your bike? Are you okay? I started in a slightly raised voice that would carry across the lot without waking the neighbors. That's when Gov started to shake his head back and forth. A weird, almost boneless looking sway that reminded me in some strange back corner of my brain of Stevie Wonder, but in a totally creepy way that put me on edge. I stopped walking. Gov? I said in an almost whisper, squinting at him. Little blonde one, I heard vaguely and looked around the lot. No sign of any little blonde kids, girl or boy. No sign of anyone anywhere, and the whole area was quiet. No sound of neighborhood dogs barking, no cars on the street passing. The usual 4 a.m. background sounds I'd gotten used to hearing weren't there. And in combination with a mangled bike, Gov's weird head shake, and the earlier mention of the black-eyed kids, I was scared. Or scaring myself, at the very least. I was definitely not seeing things, and my rule at the bar was to serve it, not drink it, so I wasn't even buzzed or let alone drunk. I stood where I was, a good 30 or more feet from my car, and Gov, perched on the hood, weaving so much now that his entire body looked like a fakir's cobra coming out of the basket while a flute played. Gov, cut it out. You're giving me the creeps, I said, a little too loudly, half hoping that the sound of my voice would at least set off a nearby dog or wake up some little kid and send them to rouse Mom and Dad. Seriously, dude, get off my car. I'll give you a ride home, I said, even more loudly, but the silence continued around us. Weren't pigtails, I heard him say, watching the strings of his hoodie swaying, almost hypnotized by them. Nope, weren't pigtails at all. Jesus, I thought, he only had 2 beers. He's lost his damn mind, and I'm gonna have to deal with him in the middle of the night. Where was the ticket picket when you needed it? I took another 3 steps forward, running through rationalizations in my head. Maybe Gov was more drunk than I thought. Maybe he had gotten hit by someone and was dazed. Maybe he was sick, or... I'm not sick, he said. His voice was clear in the silence. It was Gov's voice, and yet it wasn't his at all. It sounded like he'd been eating gravel or something. And I know I hadn't said anything out loud. Was he reading my mind when I thought about him being sick? He said loudly, and began to raise his head. Suddenly, I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to see anything else, or hear that weird voice coming out of him. I backed up a couple of steps, thinking I needed to get back into the bar, lock myself in, call the police. Oh, they can't help you, he growled, as his body stopped moving and his head snapped up. Nothing can help now. He made eye contact with me, and it was clear, even in the orange sodium arc lights, his entire eye area, not just the pupil or the iris even, but the entire eye was solid, shiny, wet, infinitely deep black. The scream that tore out of me at that instant had to wake the neighbors, but I didn't care. I spun and managed 3 fast steps before I heard an impossibly fast movement behind me, barely registering the creak of my car as Gov's weight came off of it before he slammed into me from behind, knocking me to the sidewalk, my keys flying one way, my purse flying the other, the breath in my lungs gone as I barely caught myself before my face met the concrete. They aren't aliens, ghosts, or vampires, I heard in a quiet growl near my ear, smelling Gov's breath, a mix of rotting meat and burnt matches. But you're about to make it onto someone's top 10 list, he snarled. The sound of inhuman laughter followed the last thing I heard before the pain began and the world went black. And that is the end of the story. That was really good. I have always heard lots of different stories about the black-eyed children and kind of theories on what they are or where they're from, or even if they really exist. So this was a really fun story to read. It was very well written. I hope I did it justice in reading it. I really enjoyed this. It's definitely creepy. I think this is another one that would be really cool in sort of the comic book form. Obviously, it would need to be cut around or cut back a little bit differently to fit that comic book style, but I think it would be really cool to see it illustrated in that way. I'm not an artist like that, or I would totally do that. It would be really cool to see. Great story. My only question is, how is she telling the story if she was attacked by a man who was attacked by the black-eyed children? That's my only question. Other than that, I love it. Love it, and I hope you guys loved it too. But guys, that pretty much wraps it up for this one. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And if you don't know what to comment down below, leave some black emojis. Leave the black heart, just the black circle, whatever black thing you feel like. Not only does that help out my channel a lot, but it lets me know that you were here. It gives us a chance to chat. It lets me know you made it to the end of the video. And of course, I just love to see your faces down there. If you want another way to help out my channel, down below there are links to my website, my merch store, and my Patreon. There's zero obligation to check any of those out, but if you want to, you can. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of you so very much. Remember to stay genki AF, and I will see you next time. Bye! Oh, hello there. Yes, this is me casually drinking from my Genki AF merch because I don't have any bloopers to share. But if you like my cup or my shirt or some leggings or some socks, there's links in the description below. Be Genki and enjoy your coffee or tea or water or whatever else you like to drink from mugs.